Please tell me this was working, because I recorded this once and it was not on. What is whitegirlification? It is a rhetorical concept that I've kind of come up with. I dubbed it whitegirlification. This has been permeating our culture for forever, to be honest. But I just really like this concept, and that's why I chose it. Whitegirlification is very familiar to me as a chronically online teenage Gen Z white girl. It involves, unsurprisingly, how white girls learn the dialects of various marginalized communities, like specifically and especially the African American vernacular English, or slang from the Black community, the ballroom scene, stuff like that, and also the LGBTQIA plus slang that we know and love so well. They'll learn it and then they'll use it to an almost excessive point. These will perjurate the impact of these terms and associate very, very subliminally. These terms will evoke a message of unseriousness that is linked to these communities of origin. Like, whether we realize it or not, it happens. This concept has fascinated me for a long time, and like while I've matured, I've learned more and more about the origins of the terms that I so dearly love and use in daily life a lot. Emily, did you get that drink from Starbucks? It's actually it's an Alani mixed with Star Refresher. Okay, tea. Very, very demure. I know, I know. Slaps. Eats the boots house down. Purr, slay, eat, queen, say less, demure, mindful, things like this. These are all terms that have originated from marginalized communities, especially the AAVE community and LGBTQI plus people. When we carefully consider these words and where they come from, we can gain a better understanding, appreciation, and viewpoint of these cultures and outgroups. Outgroups is defined, by the way, as groups of people who share a defining characteristic. If that one's not sure, we can appreciate them better and learn to embrace our differences and rejoice in those, because those are beautiful differences. And God forbid a girl wants to be more socially aware. Chapter 2 of Spurr's The Rhetoric of Empire, Appropriation, is extremely relevant to whitegirlification. It involves and implies when one takes something, one thinks that it's theirs to begin with, therefore it's not taking at all. This is an interesting tension within language, because the way language originates and expands and evolves is we're all learning from all of each other constantly, all of the time. And it's important to hold that in contrast with taking these words out of context and out of the cultural context and kind of stealing them and colonializing them in a way. It's just a really interesting tension to kind of appreciate, honestly. Because the internet is such a beautiful and diverse place, AAVE, slang from the LGBTQIAS plus community, is very thoroughly mixed and a part of that, and therefore we get exposed to it in a beautiful way. And that's so wonderful about the internet, is there's so much culture on there all the time, and we're being exposed to new things that are challenging our ideas and challenging us. But as that happens, white girls kind of tend to take these terms and be like, they're mine now. They'll use them too much, and then it becomes annoying, and then those negative stereotypes that are associated with that word now are then traced back to the communities which they originate from. PBS Origins has a great theory-based video that I want to draw on for a second on blaccent, which is when a person in general kind of tries to talk like a Black person. Examples of this in celebrities include Billie Eilish, JoJo Siwa, and they're talking very drawly and very say a bunch of things like this, kind of almost. Blaccent can be really harmful because it kind of almost mocks Black culture. It ignores the painful and rich history behind African American vernacular English and how much Black people have had to endure in America's history. And to just go on as a white person talking like that, it's extremely insensitive, and they call it verbal blackface, and I think that's a really great way of approaching it. There's another piece of literature that I want to draw from here. Smokowski wrote a thesis dissertation on the use specifically of AAVE on social media by non-Black users, and then how that usage perpetuates negative stereotypes such as unprofessionalism, unintelligence, ditziness, airheadedness, things like that. those negative stereotypes are then perpetuated and projected onto the Black community and the speakers of AAVE. This really speaks to why we need to be cautious of white girlification and cognizant of whether we are perpetuating that or whether we are confronting that, or we're just being neutral and standers by. We also need to be careful with things like this to not develop a white savior complex, because that can also, in a separate way, undermine the independence and realness of these marginalized communities. TikTok user at Etymology Nerd has a really awesome video that briefly examines the trends between words trending within the LGBTQIA+ community and Black communities, and then the rise in trending within those straight white girl community. And then the resulting popularization, gentrification, and colonialization of that word, hence the name of my concept, Whitegirlification. He really goes into depth with some statistics, and I'll see if I can pull them up on the screen here. This results in a lot of popularization, gentrification, and colonialization of these words, meaning we don't allow room for Black creators or LGBTQI+ creators or people, not even just creators, to use these terms without calling them names or stupid or dumb or projecting these negative stereotypes that are associated with these words onto them. And it's really problematic. Those same names and things, white girls aren't called that. If we're gonna attribute negative stereotypes to the word, it needs to be upheld consistently, at the very least. TikTok user Michelle has a video on TikTok slang explained, and a lot of those terms can be traced back to African American vernacular English or LGBTQI+ slang. Those terms can then be traced within their rise in popularity within their origin communities, and then the rise in popularity in the straight white girl community, and then there's all of these negative connotations and associations that are attributed to these communities of origin. And it's kind of tragic because our class is largely Gen Z, and on the older side of this generation, many have experienced firsthand the white girlification of African American vernacular English and LGBTQI+ slang under the pretense of pop culture dialect evolving. My intent with this video was to drive home that, regardless of intent, the meta-linguistic properties, meaning the properties of a term outside of strictly language, so the cultural connotations and context surrounding that term, of certain terms, reinforces negative stereotypes of marginalized communities. I also hope to show that while being mindful of one's language personally is good, one needs to ensure they aren't falling into a white savior complex. To sum it all up, Hartman writes on this in Scenes, which we read from, when we have a certain form of empathy and kind of too much, we can overlook the actual suffering these marginalized communities go through. It's almost like aestheticization, where it's just like, oh, look at this. We need to be very cautious when we are empathizing with people, because especially people in marginalized communities, when we ourselves are not in those communities, it's important to acknowledge that this white savior complex, but we also need to be careful of not lessening the impact of the backgrounds and the histories of these marginalized communities from which slang terms originate. Basically, if there's one thing that I want you to come out with, I really want you to carefully consider what words you associate certain meanings with. What do you think of when you hear someone saying purr, when you hear someone saying tea, eating, things like that? Because ultimately that does subliminally affect how you feel towards these communities that they originate from. Anyways, thanks for listening to my white girl rant on white girlification. You have a great day. My bad. My bad. Suffering. Oh no.